2 weeks ago. The leftover typhoon that came out of the Northwest Pacific and entered the Bering Straits, Bering Sea, and went north. But we're also going to talk about an impending storm, and that is going to also hit Alaska, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. I'm just going to give you a quick summary right now of some of the stuff that is occurring on the recovery part of the storm, and then we'll stop. We'll have David Kramer with NOAA talk about the next storm that's coming up, and then when he's done, we're going to open it up for questions from the press for David and for NOAA based upon this storm that is predicted to also hit Alaska here in the next few days. Once we're done with those questions, we'll go back into having our other staff talk about the recovery efforts, and then we'll entertain more questions, and at the end, we'll let you guys ask all the questions you need to ask regarding the upcoming storm, or the predicted storm, as well as the recovery. So I'm going to go into the recovery process just briefly here before we turn it over to David with NOAA. So 161 homes have been inspected so far, with 123 identified with major damage. 15 homes are destroyed. This is all in the storm path from the last storm that occurred a couple weeks ago. Priority is to get these homes buttoned up and safe for winter and ensure everyone has a place to live. As we mentioned, this is not like the lower 48. We have freeze up here in Alaska that's pretty predictable, and that usually starts to set in western and northern Alaska sometime in mid-October. With regard to individual assistance, the state has taken almost 450 applications under the Individual Assistance Program. FEMA Individual Assistance Program has already distributed $790,000 in aid to impacted individuals. We've asked people to apply for both state and federal programs at the same time, just in case the federal application is rejected. And we're thankful to see FEMA is moving quickly to get aid to impacted individuals. I do want to let you know that we've seen FEMA people in our travels out to western Alaska. We just got back late last night from our trip out west and up north. FEMA people are there. We know the Red Cross has been involved in that. We'll talk a little bit here in a couple minutes about National Guard involvement, as well as DOT and other emergency personnel. So with regard to relief supplies, tons of insulation and plywood have arrived from Hooper Bay up to Gullivan. We've seen ships, actual barges, offloading materials. C-130 is headed to the region today with 16,000 pounds of relief supplies. The BIA is delivering 15 pallets of water every couple of weeks to Untitled. With regard to subsistence foods, 10,000 pounds of salmon donated by Trident on the way from Kodiak to Hooper Bay and Chivak. Alaska Fish and Game has reopened or extended moose hunts at the request of community members in Good News Bay, Untitled, and Gullivan. And we know it's definitely a priority to replace subsistence foods that were lost as a result of the last storm. Road repairs, DOT and its contractors are making great progress. We saw a lot of work when we were out west with regard to road repairs. Keep in mind, on some of these roads we're talking about are right on the coast, and so they act as both a road, and in some instances they act as a levee or a storm break. The Nome Council work is proceeding. Front Street in Elam repaired and is being reinforced. The road to Moses Point out at Elam is being rebuilt. In Gullivan, the community is in the process, with the help of others, using the sand collected from the storm to rebuild berms on the beach at the Spit. This Coast Guard, and I wanted to give a shout out to the Coast Guard as well, is working with residents in Chivak on boat recovery and preventing hazardous spills. So the total team effort, and it has been a team effort. I want to thank the mayors of these communities. We've met with many of the mayors, and they are working very hard to get things up and running. I want to thank city council members. I want to thank tribal heads, tribal members. I want to thank the consortiums that work on housing and other aspects of the people's lives out there. I want to thank the school districts out west, for allowing their schools to be used as evacuation centers, but also being very flexible in dealing with some of the aspects of the emergency and helping, in many cases, giving rooms to some of the folks that are dealing with the recovery so that they get their work done. So I'm very proud of all these folks. We met some extraordinary folks out in western Alaska, extraordinary folks that live there year-round, that are residents, but also folks that have gone out to help. And again, I want to thank all the local tribal nonprofit and all the volunteers pitching in. Unfortunately, and this is what we're going to lead into, we're not done with the storms. And David Parker, in just a moment, is going to talk about an impending storm that is going to be somewhat unusual in its direction from where it's coming from. He's going to talk about the intensity and what the best models are going to predict for this storm. So this is another storm that's going to hit western Alaska, northwestern Alaska. And we have already begun the process of notifying people up north. We were hoping that through this press conference, that information gets out to a wider audience. And again, we are here and prepared to help our people in Alaska, both in preparation for the storm that's coming, both in the recovery from the storm that occurred 2 weeks ago, and whatever recovery is going to be needed in the storm that's heading our way. We are prepared to deal with that as well. So I'm going to take a minute here and let David come up to the podium. He's got a slide deck. He's going to talk to folks about this impending storm. And then we'll stop at that moment, let press ask questions on this impending storm. And then we'll get back into having our other folks up here talk about their portion of the press conference and the work that they've done on the recovery. And then they also be able to answer questions on what, depending on what occurs with the storm, what we could be looking at next in terms of their work. So David, come on up.
Thank you, thank you, Governor Dunleavy. I'm David Kramer with the National Weather Service. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to talk a minute about the storm that is upcoming to the northwest coastline and the impacts that will have to our communities out there. And before we jump into the slides, I want to point out our website, weather.gov/Alaska. Weather is ever changing, and our folks are working around the clock to continue to provide updated forecasts. So if you check our website, you'll get the most updated information that you can at any point of the day. Next slide. So starting off, we have a low that's right now over northeastern Russia, and that is tracking farther to the north. It's going to move into the western portions of the Chukchi Sea, moving later tonight and into tomorrow. What's unique about this storm is that it's actually intensifying in strength as it approaches Wrangel Island. Typically with storms that impact the northwest coastline, they start off in the Bering Sea. They hit their lowest point as far as depth of the low in the Bering Sea, and then as they track north, they'll continue to weaken but still provide impacts to the west coast. This storm is unique in that it is going to continue to get stronger as it moves into the western portions of the Chukchi Sea. So for that area for this time of year, this will be one of the strongest storms that we have seen. Our record goes back to 1950, and this will be pushing some of those boundaries. We won't know for sure on the final depth of this low until tomorrow, as it is not expected to reach its lowest point until tomorrow morning. Also with this storm, I want to note that it is going to bring up a lot of warmer air with it, and we do expect this to bring rain to much of the west coast, not snow at this point. However, after this storm passes and we move into the weekend, it is going to pull down some colder air to the west coastline that we will expect to see temperatures dropping to well below freezing for those lows in the weekend, and we will start to see some snow showers after this system moves through. Next slide. So this will bring two major impacts to the coast. The first one is going to be winds. So we do have high wind warnings out for much of the northern portions of the west coast of Alaska. Those are starting on the northern portions today at 4 p.m. and going to last until midnight on Thursday. We're going to see winds out of the south all along the northwest coast, 30 to 40 miles per hour. And some of the areas farther west are going to see gusts up to 65 or 70. The hardest hit areas are going to be Point Lay to Point Hope. And we could see max gusts up to 75 miles per hour. Next slide. The other impact that we're going to see is coastal flooding. The main portion of the coastal flooding will be north of the Bering Strait, and from an area from the Bering Strait through Utqiagvik is where we expect to see the highest levels of coastal flooding. We have gotten new data since the making of this map, and it is going to be slightly less in terms of those highest sea heights. However, the impacts, areas, and timing are going to remain the same from what you see on the slide. So we are going to see areas, the highest seas that are going to be above normal high tide will be along the northwest coastline. Right now, we do have some thin sea ice in those areas, and do want to point out that this system will be warm enough where we do not expect any of that ice to move inland. It will melt out from the warmer temperatures that we are going to see in the water and in the air. And then as the system moves away, we do have some of that sea ice reforming in the colder air, but that is going to be this weekend. No sea ice is expected to move inland from this system. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about the individual communities a little bit later. So we'll move on to the southern areas now with the next slide. We're going to have more high wind warnings down through the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island. Here we could see max gusts up to 60 miles per hour. This is also going to be out of the south. And these winds have already started to pick up and will continue to be strong through midnight tonight. Next slide. We're going to have some coastal flooding impacts in the southern areas as well through Norton Sound, down through the Yukon Delta, and out by Deering as well. We have coastal flood advisories out for both Deering and Gullivan, and then high surf advisories out for the rest of Norton Sound through the Yukon Delta area. We'll see some increase in wave heights here as well, 3 to 4 feet in some of those locations. And some of the impacts for this: fish camps, hunting camps that are near the water, coastal erosion is expected, and infrastructure that's near the water could also be impacted by these higher seas. Next slide. So some of the site-specific areas, I want to point out that some of the highest ones are going to be up north. Point Lay and Wainwright are going to see the highest 5 to 7 feet above normal high tide. And they're also going to have winds gusting up to 75 miles per hour for the Point Lay area. However, that's going to happen before the highest sea heights. So the winds are going to happen first, with the strongest on the northwest portion of the coast Wednesday evening. And then the highest sea heights will be later on Thursday into Friday for most locations. Some of the earliest portions of that happening up north. That'll conclude the broad portion of my weather summary, with the main points being higher winds expected today through tomorrow, and then sea heights picking up tomorrow through Friday, and in some cases in the Norton Sound lasting into Saturday morning.
So I think right now, David, we're going to have some questions. Jeff will start them off with the reporters on this impending storm.
Yeah, Governor, we'll take our first question in the room from Georgiana Fernandez with Alaska's News Source.
Hi, are we expecting similar damages or more intensified damages to these areas compared to the last storm?
So this storm is a little bit unique in that the main impacts from this are going to be up north, so it's hard to say how comparable damage could be at this time. The Norton Sound area that saw the highest impacts from what was the remnants of Typhoon Merbok will see much lower sea heights overall. However, I don't want to diminish the fact that they will see impacts from this. It will just be weaker than what we saw with what was Merbok. The northern areas were much less impacted by remnants of Typhoon Merbok, and they will be heavier hit this time around. So that area from the Bering Strait north through Utqiagvik.
Okay, we're going to take questions on the Zoom call right now. Let's start with Becky Borer with Associated Press in Juneau.
David, when you talk about the areas that are expected to be impacted, can you put that into context for us? With the last storm, you were talking about something we hadn't seen in decades. What can residents of those areas in Northwest Alaska be prepared for? Are we talking, for example, like widespread power outages, widespread flooding? Is this, again, something like a once in a decades type storm that we're facing?
So yeah, I want to go back to the point of the location of this storm. It's very non-typical to see a storm of this strength out by the western areas of the Chukchi Sea and Wrangell Island. However, we do see significant storms moving through the Bering Strait into the eastern portions of the Chukchi Sea that could have similar impacts. So we're speaking in terms of like on the record about how it goes back to 1950 and how strong this one is comparison, but that's a very unique area for this storm. As far as the exact impacts, I can speak to the weather portion of that, but I can't determine what kind of infrastructure would be damaged by the winds. I can tell you that some of the strongest winds are going to be up to 75 miles per hour out of the south. And that could cause debris to get moved around and could potentially have impact to infrastructure, but I can't speak exactly to that. But it will be 75 miles per hour from that point, from Point Lay through Point Hope, and many of the other areas around Norton Sound through the northern portion of the West Coast will see strong winds as well, many of them seeing gusts up to 60 miles per hour. We have high wind warnings out for many of those locations that could cause some level of damage. As far as the coastal flooding, again, it's going to be lower than it was with the remnants of Merbok in the Norton Sound area. However, we are going to see still significant wave heights, 3 to 4 feet in many of those locations above normal high tide that could have impact to infrastructure, roads, fish camps, hunting camps, anything near the water. And we could also see impacts along the northwest coastline where we'll see some of those higher sea heights above normal high tide up to as high as 7 feet on that northwest coast.
Okay, and our next question is from Amanda Bowman at the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Amanda, your question, please.
Are you doing anything different with this current storm than you did with the last storm in terms of notifying individuals and communities?
We're going through a lot of our similar process, and we try to be as much leeway time as we possibly can. We have to monitor all the different guidances and sources of data that we have coming in. Sometimes the agreement between those makes forecasting out in time very difficult, but we do our best to identify and first in text formats we do through our area forecast discussion. We've been sending that out for days in advance of this one, as we did with the remnants of Typhoon Merbach. We will then start putting out what we call special weather statements that will show up on our website. We also send those out through emails to partners and put them on social media platforms to send out to the communities as best we can. We start calling out to partners. We've done this days in advance for both of these storm systems. We start putting out some of our watches, warnings, advisories as we get closer, and the confidence in how powerful these storms can be is out there. And we, again, try to send these out through email briefings, phone calls, social media, sending them on our website, any means that we can find to convey that message to folks in the communities out in Western Alaska.
Okay, and we have two reporters online from the Nome Nugget. We'll start with Megan Gannon.
Thanks very much. Does the Weather Service right now have anyone on the ground in Nome or in Kotzebue or any other places that might be affected by the storm?
Yeah, we do have some folks that are out at our Weather Service offices in some of the locations out there, such as Utqiagvik, Kotzebue, Nome, that could see impacts from this storm. We've also had some of our forecasters out in our weather forecast office in Fairbanks, who does a lot of the issuances of our watches, warnings, advisories, going out there to talk to communities. I know our warning coordination meteorologist was just out in Nome, Alaska, and talking to various community leaders and members of the community about impacts from this, what we could do better, what worked well, and how we can better communicate our messages moving forward.
Okay, now let's go to Diana Hackler with the Nome Nugget. Diana?
Yes, thank you. It's Diana Hacker, not Heckler. I would like to ask David, who's here in Nome currently staffing the National Weather Service office?
I don't have all the staffing profiles on me right now, but if you want to reach out to me after this press conference, I'd be happy to get you any of that information.
Yes, thank you. That's it.
Okay, and our last question from Zachariah Hughes with the Anchorage Daily News.
Hi, David. Thanks for all this really great information. And just wondering if there's any threat that's specific to the wind coming out of the south this time of year, as opposed to, say, some of the northerly winds that come during the wintertime. I mean, is it same, north-south, or is there any specific threat or hazard from these being southerly? Thank you.
A lot of the impacts for most locations, the strength of the wind is going to be much more indicative of the impacts than the direction, but that will change site-specific. I won't speak directly to any infrastructure needs or orientations of, say, runways for any aircraft trying to move. Once the winds start to calm down a little bit, they'll still be strong out of that southerly direction for a while. But we do know that, the wind impacts can have a lot of different issues for debris and impacting homes. So we want to be very mindful of that and make sure for people's safety that we just try not to focus so much on the direction for this particular one. A lot of our bearing storms have winds out of the south. So a lot of the ones that move through fall is very active weather season for the West Coast, as folks out in those communities know. And a lot of them do have the southerly winds. So to a much degree, it'll be fairly similar to what they see in a lot of the stronger wind scenarios.
David, thanks. Thank you, David. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move through our list of commissioners and General Sachs and others that are here today to talk about, they're going to talk about two things. They're going to talk about the recovery from the previous storm, and they're going to talk about preparing for and pre-positioning for this particular storm. So we're going to have Commissioner Ryan Anderson come up next, talk about the recovery process, and then if there's any pre-planning or pre-positioning of personnel or resources for this upcoming storm.
Thank you, Governor. The Alaska Department of Transportation has made really good progress in Nome and the Norton Sound communities on the recovery efforts. I really want to thank all of our contractors, our community partners. It's really been an all hands on deck effort, and we're getting there. Our focus right now is really to complete the roads and make sure they're in good, safe, passable conditions before freeze up. And we're on an accelerated time frame. Really, our goal right now is October 15th to have the roads in Nome and the subsequent Bering Sea communities very well addressed. I'll just give a quick snapshot of where we are by location. In Nome, the Front Street, we're going to be paving. Our plan is to be paving this weekend. We are watching the weather very carefully as we pursue through these construction projects, but we're going to continue on to plan for these things and move forward. We've done a lot of seawall repair in the Nome area. We've moved a lot of big rock to make sure that we're doing the best job we can to protect the coast and those critical areas. And on the Nome Council Road, we've now pioneered, we've filled in the breach that was talked about before along the road where we had a big open space that we had to fill in. And we've pioneered now all the way out to mile 31. There's only a couple miles left before we get to the final bridge where the road goes inland, and we've made that road completely passable again. So really good progress out in Nome. For Gullivan, with the community roads out there are pretty much, the majority have been addressed. We've worked to rebuild the shore erosion protection berm out there. That work is still ongoing, but we're feeling good. We've made a lot of progress on that. For Elam, the Front Street Road has been rebuilt, as the governor said, and of course Moses Point, which also goes out to some critical FAA NavAid facilities. We're 2 miles down that road, and we've got a couple more miles to go. We're anticipating, barring the effects of the storm, that we could be done with that road and have it passable by Friday. So good progress there. And we're also working on to assist Shiktulik with any needs they need in the reconstruction of their erosion berm as well. We are still working with FAA. There's various navigational aids that still have outages, but we're working to make sure we're doing our best to give FAA whatever they need to get those back running, and working that aspect. For the next event, we do have a plan. We have assessment resources that we're positioning out in the area. So as the storm progresses and we learn more, we'll be able to quickly identify where the erosion problems are on the roads, the airports, and we also have our local contractors positioned in each community that will also provide us information as that event progresses. With that, I'll pass it along to General Sachs.
All right, thank you. As far as the pending storm, this is what we're doing to prepare accordingly. So currently we have forces in both Nome and Bethel, and we've been fanning out accordingly. But should it be needed, we're preparing the armories today, Nome, Kotzebue, and Utiagbek. So the same thing will happen. We'll get the forces out there, the helicopters will be out there, and then depending on the damage, we'll get the forces out to the various communities that need help. But this could be a different storm, as we've heard, so we are getting people ready now. What we call a warning order has gone out to my forces, and we will be ready to go. As far as the current military response, it is winding down. It was the largest off-the-road system response in many decades, certainly one of the largest in, let's say, the past 30 years or so. But the specific numbers, over 170 military folks deployed out in the various areas. And I did want to talk about just a few of the things as far as the highlights. So up in the top right, that is Super Bay, and we had quite a few that went out there. We are actually helping with the individual assistance forms. We have many troops that are bilingual, and that is coming in very handy. Going down on the very bottom, that is Koyak. We were there yesterday with the governor and other folks. We had many National Guard that were out filling sandbags. And we had lots of students that came from the local school. They started helping as well. So it really was a community effort to get one house in particular shored up. So more to follow on that, but thank you to the community for coming out and helping. Very much appreciated. Here is Chivak, and one of the places, of course, that we went, but that is Alaska Native dancing. So the community did come out, and they taught some of the guardsmen after the work was done in Chivak how to do Alaska Native dancing, and we certainly appreciate that as well. Building those relationships, we never want to introduce ourselves before a crisis. If we don't have to, we want to get out and meet the community and make sure we're going forward as a team effort. As far as the team effort, the governor mentioned this a bit, but it certainly was not just the military that went out. American Red Cross, Callista, Kawark, Donlin, Team Rubicon. Many folks are out there even now helping the communities, and we are preparing accordingly for the storm that is coming as well. But I did want to point out, for those that can see it, that photo. This is what we're going for, is building those relationships in a humanitarian response. We want to get the feedback from the communities as to what we can do as far as helping the communities, what we can do better in the future. But by and large, the feedback has been positive, and want to go forward with that Team Alaska, Alaskans helping Alaskans. But just some of the stats as far as what we have done with the helicopters: over 15,000 miles flown and well over 130,000 pounds of debris. Golovin alone, we were out there yesterday looking much better, roughly 60,000 pounds of debris just in Golovin. And with that, Governor, I will turn it back over to you.
So next, we're going to kick it off to Kevin Wynn with the Small Business Administration and have a discussion about how they're helping and how you can seek assistance from them.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Governor. Kevin Wynn with the United States Small Business Administration. I'm a public information officer. I'm going to have my segments go into two parts. One is the outreach that we're doing to the business community in the affected areas, and then I'm going to give you the parameters of the SBA Disaster Assistance Program. The SBA business outreach teams in Bethel and Nome continue their on-the-ground outreach efforts to the local business communities. On Saturday, October the 1st, I addressed the Bering Strait Native Corporation shareholder meeting in Nome. Over 350 people in attendance as I spoke about the SBA disaster resources available for the business community. SBA Disaster has forged an excellent relationship with the Bering Strait Native Corporation board members who have opened many doors in the area to us. The SBA outreach team Nome met with representatives of Queric Incorporated, which is a tribal consortium and non-governmental organization that advocates for and provides assistance to the residents and businesses of 20 surrounding villages. SBA personnel, thanks to SBA's Alaska District Office, also had a meeting with Callista Native Corporation upon our arrival in Anchorage. They provided many resources in Bethel and the surrounding villages, which we are going to now. The SBA's Bethel team is leveraging that data as we conduct our outreach. SBA's PIO conduct outreach to the congressional members, radio, TV and newspapers, social media, chambers of commerce, and local economic development agencies to help spread the word about our programs. And here's a quick recap of what we do offer to the small businesses in the communities and villages affected. The businesses of all sizes and private nonprofit organizations may borrow up to $2 million to repair or replace damaged or destroyed real estate, their machinery and equipment, inventory, and any other business assets. SBA can also lend additional funds to help businesses with the cost of improvements to mitigate some type of disaster damage from occurring in the future. For small businesses, SBA also offers economic injury disaster loans to help meet working capital needs caused by the damage. Economic injury disaster assistance is available to businesses regardless of any property damage. One of the good things about these economic injury disaster loans is that they're available in the contiguous jurisdictions of the 4 jurisdictions that were declared by the president on September 23rd. So any of those businesses in those contiguous jurisdictions that are having trouble with loss of revenue, meeting payroll, or any other kind of notes payable, they can come to SBA. We encourage every business in these jurisdictions to apply with SBA disaster assistance. The teams going door to door will help you fill out your application, and you can also fill it out online as well. We recognize that the businesses take a while to get their financials in order as well. So we have a deadline for the economic injury disaster loan of June 23rd, 2023. The current deadline for the physical deadline is November 22nd, 2022. Another thing that SBA does as well is that we provide individuals and renters and homeowners with disaster loans as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So what we're going to do now is open it up for questions. Once again, questions on the impending storm, preparation, et cetera, and on the recovery. And if you just could, if you want to direct it to someone other than myself, just let us know who that is.
Okay, again, Governor, we'll start with a question in the room from Georgiana Fernandez with Alaska's News Source.
So what are the kind of the setbacks we're looking at when it comes to repairs with the damages causing this storm on top of the already damages we saw from the last storm?
Say that again. Is it
The setbacks. So we have like short timeline to kind of repair roads before the snow hits. How is this storm going to cause a setback?
Well, certainly, we're still anticipating freeze-up happening sometime in October. Usually it begins in the middle of October. We don't know what this impending storm will do to that. That may push a freeze-up back a few days, a week or so, unless there's some extraordinary event that we're not anticipating at this point. But nonetheless, again, we're pre-positioning assets. We're preparing for this storm. We can't answer that question, unfortunately, until the storm actually hits and we see how that storm manifests itself with regard to certain parts of Western Alaska and Northern Alaska. Again, what I would say to people is the models indicate a strong storm is coming your way. The models indicate the storm is going to be hitting the Norton Sound area, Bering Strait, up into the Chukchi, up to Barrow. And you want to prepare for it. You want to move things that could be carried away by the wind. You want to tie those down. You want to move boats. Anything that could be affected by the water. Obviously, we're not going to be able to move homes, but the water could be pretty powerful. We just have to be ready for that. And most importantly, obviously, is we can replace things. We just can't replace people. In the last storm we had, fortunately, no one was really injured, no missing, no deaths. We want to make sure that we all work together to have a similar outcome in terms of the safety, the health and safety of individuals. But in terms of how this is going to manifest itself, it's difficult to say. We don't know what the damage is going to be, but you should anticipate that there'll be some major impacts if these models hold.
Okay, we'll go to questions on the Zoom call. We'll go back to Becky Bohr with Associated Press in Juneau. Becky?
I don't know who this is best directed to, maybe General Sachs, but do we know at this point how many residents are still displaced from the last storm? And is there an update on efforts to get permanent housing for those residents?
Sure, we'll let Brian answer that question, Becky.
Thanks, Becky. Brian Fisher, Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the state. So we're still looking at approximately 50 residents throughout the impacted area from the last storm that are still displaced. The governor mentioned the number of destroyed homes that we have that we're dealing with right now. Our priorities are kind of twofold. One is to continue the temporary repairs. These are all temporary repairs for homes that are still deemed livable, to get them jacked up and leveled out again, to replace all the insulation and plywood that was damaged, to replace Toyo stoves and things like that, so folks can get back into those homes. For those that have homes that are destroyed, they're not going to be replaced before freeze up this year. So we are working directly with FEMA and with our partners at the Red Cross to make sure we find temporary accommodations for those survivors of this disaster. Some of those may end up being located in the community where there's available housing for folks to move into for the winter as we work on the longer term permanent housing plans for them. There may be times when we relocate folks to hub communities if that's necessary. We're working, it's individual for every community. Some communities are willing to have folks move out of their homes to the hub communities to allow elders to stay in the community. So all of those options are on the table, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency and our staff are working on that right now to make sure folks have a place for the winter for those homes that were destroyed. And we'll be making the plans to bring in all the materials to help rebuild homes when thaw happens in the spring for those homes that were destroyed.
Okay, let's take a question from Amanda Bowman at the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Amanda?
I'll pass.
Okay, let's go back to the Nome Nugget. Megan Gannon, do you have a question?
Thanks very much. My question is, are there any funds available right now for mitigation efforts that can be kind of wrapped up in some of the recovery and rebuilding efforts that are happening right now?
Ryan.
Thanks for that question. This is Brian again. So there are both on the individual assistance side as well, which is for the homeowners, as well as the public assistance side. An example of that in Gullivan, we're working on elevating and releveling some of the homes that were damaged along the coastline. Those homes are likely going to remain elevated. They have to lift them up to get out the insulation from the floors anyway. So we're going to, one home that we looked at 2 days ago, or yesterday, I think it was, is up about 2.5, 3 feet higher than it was already elevated before the last storm. So we're going to leave that home elevated to protect it for the next storm. The infrastructure, the damaged roads and bridges and airports, things like that, community infrastructure, there's opportunity to do mitigation enhancements right now as we're repairing it. It really makes sense if we're going to harden things, make them more protective for the next storm, is to do that now while we're making repairs from the damage from the previous storm. So across both of those programs, there's opportunity to do mitigation now as well as long-term into the future.
Okay, we'll stick with the Nome Nugget. Diana, do you have another question?
Yes, actually, I have a very specific question. As the winds are coming from the south, we have a large debris pile left by the burning of the Bering Sea restaurant that is causing, probably is going to fly around. So I was wondering if the state is somehow assisting in helping us shore up this debris pile from flying through town.
So the restaurant that was burned, this would be a municipality issue, but I'm not sure if any of us have been contacted yet to help the municipality with that particular issue. We were there, like you said, 2 days ago, yesterday and the day before, but we've not been contacted. I don't believe to be to offer any assistance, but usually something like that's taken care of by the municipality.
Okay, and our last question is from Zachariah Hughes with the Anchorage Daily News. Zachariah?
This is a question for Governor Dunleavy. Given the situation with foreign nationals arriving in the Bering Strait region by boat earlier this week in pretty much the same area where the storm is expected to hit, is the state coordinating with federal partners on preparations for receiving or recovering any more foreign nationals in the Bering Strait or Chukchi Seas who may be transiting the area?
Well, that's a great question. So let's make sure we had some context. There's two individuals that came over from Russia in a boat and were detained in Gamble. My understanding is that they're in Anchorage now, being dealt with by federal authorities. We don't anticipate a continual stream of individuals or a flotilla of individuals. We have no indication that's going to happen. So this may be a one-off. Certainly, I hope they're watching the weather reports too, because any type of transiting in the Bering Strait over the next couple of days could be dangerous. But again, this was a surprise to us. Who knows what's going to happen in the future if more individuals from Russia are trying to, intend to leave Russia through the Bering Straits. We'll have to deal with that. But again, this is two individuals they're being dealt with, and we just want everyone to be aware of the storm that's coming. So with that, we want to thank you for taking this time. So you're going to see on our site a number of phone numbers to call if you need assistance, you need information. We'll have that up on our site here over the next several days, depending on how long the storm lasts and then the recovery process. Again, what we're doing, unfortunately, is we're recovering at the same time we're preparing. And although the models indicate that the point of impact for the most intense part of the storm will be up north, the Chukchi Sea area in the northern Chukchi Sea, we still anticipate impacts in Norton Sound as well as the Bering Strait area. And so again, using precaution is probably the best thing to do. Make sure your boats are moved up, your equipment is moved up. Things can be tied down because of the wind. We don't know what the storm surge is going to do in terms of its amount, its height, its intensity, but there is anticipation that will occur. Again, your life, your health, your safety is the most important thing. Things can be replaced, and once the recovery starts, we'll help with that. But again, for those that are living in communities that erosion has already hit in the previous storm, we're working as fast as we can to deal with the erosion now and getting people up and running. But again, we're going to be there to assist Alaskans. And as we've mentioned before, whether it's a flood, earthquake, other acts of God and nature, we live in an incredible state with incredible people. We've seen some unbelievable, I think, actions on the part of some great folks, great organizations working as quickly as possible to help Alaskans during this last storm. I anticipate the same going forward. As was mentioned, we've positioned resources and assets in anticipation of the storm, and we'll do the best we can. But again, we'll have numbers on our site. We've got people on the ground in some of these areas preparing for this next storm. We continue to do the work on the previous storm. And again, it's our goal to make sure that we do everything we can to protect Alaskans and rebuild. Hopefully, this storm will not match the models. But again, we felt it incumbent upon ourselves to let the public know that there is a pretty intense storm moving up in the Chukchi Sea. It's unusual, as was mentioned by David with NOAA, that where it's coming from and its intensity. And their models have not seen something like this in some time. So be prepared. And again, we'll do everything we can to assist with the storm and the impacts. And we'll be working with your local municipalities, no doubt with your tribal governments as well in some of those areas, and any and all of the same entities that helped with this last storm, from Red Cross to other volunteer organizations, Coast Guard, military, et cetera. So with that, be safe, Alaska. We'll give you an update when we have an update on what's happening out in Western Alaska. So thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here in the bullpen.